I don't think you can really call the subject of Patrick Murphy's story tonight a one-hit wonder because he did so many things and he did them very well. But here in St. Louis, it's just really hard to get beyond his most famous creation. But we're going to try.
I think for anyone thinking about Eero Saarinen, you automatically default to the image of the arch. This image is not only then synonymous with Eero Saarinen, synonymous with St. Louis, it potentially is synonymous with modern architecture in the United States itself, and for many, perhaps modern architecture around the world.
The arch dominates not only the St. Louis riverfront, but many of Eero Saarinen's other achievements as one of the 20th century's most prolific and unorthodox architects and designers. His work was different from mainstream modernists, introducing new shapes and spaces to an unusually wide range of projects, including major airport terminals, corporate headquarters, private residences, and even furniture. A recent exhibit at the Kemper Art Museum at Washington University presented a fresh view of his life's work and his own take on modernity. Saarinen grew up in the creatively charged environment of the Cranbrook Academy of Art near Detroit. His father, Eero, left Finland for the United States when Eero was a teenager to design the campus and serve as its first president. At Cranbrook, the young Eero learned to see connections between art, design, sculpture, and architecture. And from that realization, he developed principles that would guide him throughout his professional life.
One was the architect or the designer as being possessed by a social responsibility, that your work is devoted towards the betterment of the human condition, whether the individual sitting in a chair or all of us gazing up at the arch. Secondly would have been a fascination with materials, how things are made. Thirdly would have been, especially as an immigrant, the belief that America was still a place of opportunity.
Unimpressed with the glass and steel box high-rises of the mainstream modernist architects, Saarinen's buildings had more fluid shapes, like the TWA Flight Center at JFK, the main terminal building of Dulles Airport outside Washington, D.C., the CBS Headquarters, known as Blackrock in midtown Manhattan, and of course the Gateway Arch, which combined sculpture and architecture in a way that had never been done before. Saarinen's work did not fall into any easily identified style. Every project was different, as if each could have been created by a different designer. Ironically, it was that ability to adapt his own modernist vision uniquely to each project and client that invited criticism after his death at the age of 50 in 1961 and led to a decline of his reputation.
Strangely, but perhaps all too understandably, immediately upon his death, the work, it's evaluated as being too idiosyncratic, too individualistic, and this is something that makes his work difficult for architectural historians to categorize, for art historians to categorize, for the public to understand. Now we see his work differently. Now we see his work again as giving the due attention to the potentials of materials, the potentials of structural thinking, the potentials of thinking more fluidly about space. And again, there are any number of architects who find inspiration in his work.
The exhibit offered some interesting insights into the workings of Saarinen's mind.
He wrote a letter with both hands, mirror writing?
Yes. He had this ambidextrous talent. He could write backwards and forwards with using both hands at the same time. Again, perhaps just an example of a very flexible mind working on both sides of the brain, but then turning anything he did essentially into a work of design. He designed furniture, chairs, tables, tableware. One of the things that the exhibition brings forward in, I think, an extraordinary way for an exhibition is the range and diversity and sheer profusion of designs accomplished at the scale of furniture. Of course, of particular note is the tulip chair, calling into question some of our conventional understandings of furniture, but more particularly trying to add a simplicity and an elegance to everyday life, which also the underlying belief that these designs could be realized in a mass-produced way and therefore made available to many, many people as they were. We'll often speak about the relationship between the chair and the arch and how it's important to see them as emerging from the same mind, from the same hand, from the same sensibility, that in looking at the chair we should be capable of seeing the arch and vice versa and seeing everything in between. That is what kind of consistency that any architect would hope to achieve.
And so a Finnish immigrant would emerge as a major force in shaping the look of 20th century America, driven by the belief that architecture and design could express the sweeping, unbounded possibilities of his adopted homeland.
No one can deny the idealism and the grandeur of Saarinen's visions right through the middle of the 20th century.